Anyway, but yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, and thank you
Nice to
guys
finally
for.
meet you.
Oh, you too. And thanks for being involved.
Of course.
It's I've been a fan of Belt for I guess how long have you guys been around? Because I know when I became aware of you, but I don't know if that's
2013
okay.
was when the first book came out, and when Anne launched the magazine. But we really didn't. Our publishing program really ramped up like 2 years ago, like from publishing like 3 books a year to now we have like 12 books coming out this year. So the first couple of years, we were really doing like 2 or 3 titles a year, and now it's it's so significant. We have a whole catalog.
That's great.
Knocked my reading glasses on the ground.
And I know I became aware of you all with when What You're Getting Wrong About Appalachia came out, which has been huge for us.
It's been huge for us too.
Yeah.
But I can
yeah.
imagine it. Yes, I know it's done very well for your store.
Well, we're like one of the rare, there's like a handful of stores that get to be both Southern and Appalachian. So we could get to double up on like our regional interests, which is nice.
Yeah.
And that book especially has been really big for us. And I think I had told you in an email that it finally outsold.
Anthology.
Yes.
That's exciting. Yay.
Last year. I was kind of waiting for that to happen.
Yeah, that's exciting.
So.
And well deserved.
Yes. And Elizabeth Catt, who wrote it, she has a new book coming out in the fall.
It's actually been pushed back a little bit.
Okay.
I think this new pub date is February. But yeah, it's called because everything's just been pushed.
Pub dates seem more like a time isn't real anymore, so nobody.
Yeah, and for us, it was a decision, it wasn't something forced upon us. It was mostly to make make everybody's lives a little easier. Like, it doesn't have to come out in September. Let's give ourselves enough time and space to like do a good job with the titles that we have in the pipeline, since we're all juggling a lot of stuff right now. So, but yeah, it's called Pure America, and it's about a book about eugenics. So it's also super timely.
Yeah, I think we forget how timely it is. Like, we don't.
Yeah, it's about the history of eugenics, the eugenics program in the state of Virginia, but it's not just a book of history, obviously, because it's Elizabeth. It's weaving in a lot of contemporary analysis and cultural criticism.
And what's your role at Belt exactly?
I am. I'm both a senior editor, and I'm also right now the marketing director. So, which means that I do all the PR and work on. Sorry about that. My mom. I do all the media relations, except for occasionally we'll hire like an outside publicist for some of our really big for our bigger books. But I do most of the publicity. I do a lot of the upkeep of our online store and things like that, like public facing marketing materials.
You're a pretty small operation, so I assume.
Yeah, we are six people, and we're all part-time.
So lots of hats for everyone.
Yeah, everybody wears a lot of hats.
Well, we were having you on here to kind of, maybe I've got some questions about Belt, because
Sure.
I feel like what you all have been doing has been, there was, especially like, I think it kind of, with What You're Getting Wrong About Appalachia, like after the election in 2016, there was a lot of focus on Middle America and this sort of like perceived mystery about what is going on there. And so a lot of what Belt has put out has been books focused on that, but from a more kind of diverse standpoint, I want to say generous.
Yeah, I mean, and that's what we were doing before 2016. We just feel like the rest of the world caught up to us. I mean, that's been sort of the mission all along, was to provide these sort of, insiders looks at these Midwestern communities that were stories told by people who live there, and they were primarily for people who live there. It's not about trying to explain the Midwest to an outside audience so much, although obviously that's part of it, but it's more about shoring up our own conversation about ourselves. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Hold on one second. If I have a copy of, well, I don't have a copy of the Cleveland anthology, but like, so the first book that we did, which was actually before I was involved with Belt, was an anthology of writing about Cleveland. It's like writing about Cleveland by people in Cleveland or people with strong connections to Cleveland. And then it was really, this is before we had national distribution or anything, and it was basically sold in Cleveland and online, and it did really, really well. And Anne realized that Anne Trubeck, who's the founder of Belt, realized that there was really a hunger for this kind of narrative. So like, this is the Detroit anthology, which was the third city anthology that we did. And we've done, I think, 12 or 13 of these now. That are just anthologies of writing about different Midwestern communities. And now we're branching out beyond the Midwest, or really pushing the boundaries, I think, of what people would consider the Midwest, because I'm just about to sit down and start working on our Louisville anthology.
I love that you guys do that, because Asheville's a small city.
Yeah.
A lot of notoriety as like a tourist destination. And we've got like a rich history, a literary history and things like that, and a very strong community of writers. But I feel like, as far as like the greater literary world goes, and even like to an extent like the publishing industry, being in the South or being in the Midwest, like a lot of authors, bookstores, readers kind of get overlooked.
Mm-hmm.
And so I appreciate that you guys are out there giving voice to your region.
It's really pleasurable.
Yeah.
Honestly. Yeah, I mean, we have books in the works right now. I just finished working on our Gary anthology, Gary, Indiana, and that's coming out this fall, and the Louisville book is coming out this fall. We have a second edition of our anthology about Youngstown coming out at the end of June. This is a book that came out in 2015 originally and did really, really well. Like, considering that it's about a city that is not very big anymore, and I think that we were really surprised and gratified by the response to the Youngstown book. Like, I think every person in Youngstown bought a copy. So we're doing a second edition of that. We have books in the works about Sioux Falls, South Dakota, Kansas City, Dayton. Those are all kind of in the works for 2021. So it's exciting.
Yeah, no, that's great.
Maybe we'll do Asheville.
I would love that. Well, we're starting a small little publishing thing ourselves, which is going to be some like reissues of stuff for now, and then we're going to see where it goes. But but if you guys want to do that before us,
yeah, okay. Well, we'll talk.
You actually know what you're doing. We're still just trying to like.
I think we've kind of figured it out now, and then we had, and then all hell broke loose. So.
Well, we like announced this thing that we're doing. It's going to be called Leaning Chair Press, and I don't know if like any of this has gotten like delayed, but our plans for it. We have a couple books that we're working on, and there's like 3 of us kind of doing stuff with it, and we don't really know what we're doing. But when we announced it and it got some attention, like people were emailing us
and excited.
Like we knew what we were doing, which was really nice.
Yeah, that happens.
So I think it's best not to admit that. I'll do it on here, but
make it till you make it, man.
Exactly.
That's my motto.
Very true. Yeah. So let's talk about some of the Belt books that are coming out, and maybe some of the like if you've got backlists that.
I've got tons of. Well, let me talk about our spring books, because one of the big reasons why I wanted to talk to you and do this was because I feel so bad for our spring authors. We have 4 books coming out in March and April, and I've been working on these. We have been working on these titles for a very long time. They're really beautiful, and they're all very different from each other, and it's just kind of it is heartbreaking to me that the plans for to roll out these books have been, obviously radically revised, and all of our author events and big fun release parties have been canceled and all of that. So, and obviously our writers, the writers have all been incredibly gracious, and, they're just rolling with it like everyone else is rolling with everything. But I just wanted to give them another chance, a little plug.
Yeah.
So these are our four spring books, and we can go back and talk about some backlists.
Okay.
So this one is El Dorado Freddy's, which is came out on March 3rd, and it is we think it's the world's first book of fast food poetry. It is a collection of poems about dining in chain restaurants, mostly in Kansas, paired with a suite of photographs by Tara Ray. The poems are by Danny Kane, who's a poet and also the owner of the Raven Bookstore in Lawrence, Kansas. Do you know Danny?
I haven't met him personally. I think
Okay.
I've emailed with him before, but I feel like if you're on Twitter at this point,
Yeah,
and involved in books, you know who he is.
Yeah, he's pretty big on Twitter, and he also just wrote, he's gotten a lot of traction in the last 6 months or so, because he started this sort of, one-man band campaign against Amazon from an independent bookseller's perspective, and he published a zine, and it's been getting a lot of distribution around that.
Yeah. And we sold that very well too.
Yes, yes. And so this is a book of poetry that by Danny. It's not just about chain restaurants, but it's also about Midwestern identity, and it's about parenting. It's actually really sweet because the chronology of the poems tracks from the very early days of he and his wife finding out that they were going to have a baby, through her pregnancy, and then the delivery of their son, and kind of their experiences being a young parent, and kind of, so each poem has that element to it, which is tracking the evolution of their family, and it's really sweet and lovely and funny, and I don't know, it's great. It's also, this is the first book I ever actually acquired for Belt.
Exciting.
As the actual acquisitions editor. So yeah, El Dorado Freddy's by Danny Kane and Tara Ray.
I think something also maybe a selling point for that is, I feel like I really miss fast food right now.
Yeah, it talks a lot about. He talks a lot about, kind of the chain restaurant as, it's a communal experience. It's something that you know what you're getting into. You know what you can expect. Everybody who's ever been to an Olive Garden knows what an Olive Garden is like.
Right.
And so it's a shared experience that we are deprived of in this particular moment in time. And yeah, I would love to go to a Waffle House right now, frankly.
Yeah, my girlfriend and I are both big fans of, Olive Garden specifically, yeah. But we'll indulge in that stuff. We like finer things, but I feel like we're both missing just being able to go to a restaurant.
Yeah, a restaurant. What a concept! A place where you go and sit and someone brings you food. Crazy. So yeah, so the audience for this book is sort of all over the place, I think, because it's like, people who like poetry, it's food people, it's for photography people, it's for parenting people, and it's light, and we need something light. Everybody needs a little lightness right now, so
definitely
really love that. And then the other book that came out in March is Rust Belt Femme, which is by Rachel Ann Jolie, and it came out March 10th, kind of right when the hammer started coming down. So Rachel's been doing a bunch of, she has done some online like bookstore talks and things like that. She and one of our other authors just did a thing with Literati Bookstore in Ann Arbor last night, like a Zoom conversation. But this is a memoir, Rachel's memoir of growing up in Cleveland and outside of Cleveland, growing up poor. When she was 4 years old, her father got hit by a drunk driver and suffered a traumatic brain injury that was profoundly disabling, and really changed the course of her family's life in really kind of rough ways. So it's about growing up essentially with a single mom, and kind of struggling to come to terms with trauma and with her own identity, and with her sort of like understanding of class as a teenager, And then kind of coming to find herself in the alternative culture of Cleveland in the late 90s and early 2000s. So about like going out and going to punk rock shows and kind of exploring the counterculture and having her eyes open to this whole new world of politics and music and art, which resonated a lot for me because I had a very similar teenage life. So her process of kind of that kind of discovery was really rang true for me, even though I'm a little older than her. And Rachel, this book just got a really, really amazing review in the New Republic.
Okay.
By Kim Kelly. Just came out, Monday? What day is today?
Today's Thursday.
Yeah, a really, really beautiful rave review of this book in the New Republic out this week, or maybe at the end of last week. So check that out. Rachel's awesome. She's also super online, so you can follow her online on Instagram and on Twitter. And yeah, we love her. And then Rachel and Phil did this thing at Literati last night. Phil Chrisman's book, Midwest Futures, came out this week. And this is another book. It's a little hard this is the one that's got the hardest elevator pitch because it's pretty heady. It's a smarty pants book for smart people who like history and cultural criticism and thinking about identity and politics. And he kind of, this really, really, really speaks to what you were talking about at the beginning about how especially in the wake of the 2016 election, everyone was trying to interrogate like what the identity of the Midwest was. And this mythical notion of the sort of normal American, which is presumed to be the white working class Midwestern voter. And so this book is about exploding that trope. Much in the way that What You're Getting Wrong About Appalachia was the book about exploding tropes about what the identity of Appalachian and Appalachians. It talks a lot about the history of the Midwest in terms of the evolution of the nation and in terms of the evolution of industry and capital. The Midwest as sort of this site for entrepreneurial experimentation and transportation and the growth of the futures market and agriculture and like all these other things. It's not the most optimistic book in the world, but it's very beautifully written, and it is dark at times, but it's really funny. It's dark and funny and super smart, and feels very prescient. I mean, especially now. It's really, because a lot of it is about, in many ways, talking about the Midwest as a site of hope in a time of crisis. And it really talking about climate change, but because everybody's sort of saying like, oh yeah, the Great Lakes region is where, the only place that's going to be livable when the climate change apocalypse comes upon us. Well, now we're sort of in the middle of a different apocalypse that we didn't quite expect. But I feel like the same questions about like, what is it that makes the Midwest seem resilient? Like, what does that mean? It feels very relevant. Did that make any sense?
It did.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good. I could talk for I feel like I could talk for a really long time about Phil's book and like still kind of be circling around the jelly at the center of the donut.
I think that's a sign of a good book, though.
Yeah, and my mother, I sent my mother a care package of books because she's been really housebound for the last month, and she just texted me this morning to say she just started reading this and she was totally hooked. So,
does she live in the Midwest or?
No, she lives in Seattle, so she's, it's got national appeal according to my mom. Also, I should plug also, and Phil's book also just has been getting, so it came out on Tuesday. He's done some media this week, did this thing with Rachel last night, got plugged by James Fallows in The Atlantic yesterday, which was pretty exciting for us. He's gotten some other rave reviews. He was just on Wisconsin Public Radio yesterday talking about it. I'm sure he's definitely, there's some more things. He's got some more stuff lined up. So you'll be hearing from Phil some more this coming month. And months, I hope. And then the last book we have, this is The Last Children of Mill Creek by Vivian Gibson, which is not out yet technically, although it is, you can pre-order it on our website. or from your local independent
I think
bookstore.
our copies arrived.
Yeah, it's. I mean, we have it in house. The pub date is it pubs on April 20th, so whatever that means anymore. And I really love this book. I was the editor on this book. Vivian is a new writer. She's she's 70 or 71 right now. She just started writing after she retired at age 66. She started writing her memoirs of growing up in St. Louis in the 50s, part of a large family in a segregated working class neighborhood called Mill Creek Valley. She was one of 7 children. 8 children, 7, wait, I can't even remember, there's so many of them. Basically growing up in a 3-room apartment with her parents and all of her siblings. They didn't have running water, they didn't have central heat. Their grandmother lived upstairs. Her father worked 3 jobs taking care of the family. Her mother was a seamstress and did crafting and made hats and things from home and sold them around in the neighborhood. So it's really it's a really beautiful story of this era that has gone by, literally gone by, and also a neighborhood that's gone by, because Mill Creek Valley, this neighborhood in St. Louis, was destroyed in the late 1950s under urban renewal, and they built a freeway through it instead. And so everybody got displaced. She and her family moved out to a different neighborhood, and it's gone. Like the place is gone. So it's really sweet and full of just these like little family anecdotes about her life growing up in this place and time that's like super different from what we now know today. And Vivian came to us because she wrote an essay that was included in our St. Louis anthology, which came out last year. And the essay was about her grandmother going off to work for white people, out in the suburbs at sunup every morning, and coming home every night. And this is when there were still sundown laws in effect, and Black people couldn't be on the streets after dark. And it was a really moving piece of personal history that Ryan Schussler, the editor of the St. Louis anthology, found and included in that. And then Anne Trubeck, then after reading that essay, reached out to Vivian to say like, hey, have you thought about writing a book? And so this was the result of that. So we were gonna have a big party for Vivian at the Missouri History Museum on April 22nd. That's not happening now. Hopefully we can reschedule. But we're hoping that this still manages to find its audience in the months to come. And I think that it will.
Yeah, I love that she is a writer who got into writing later in life.
Yeah.
I really enjoy those stories. That makes me still feel hopeful that.
Yeah, she was a fashion designer and an entrepreneur, and had a family and lived in Liberia for a while. She lived in New York City for a long time and then moved to Liberia with her husband, and now she's back living in St. Louis, like not far from where she grew up, actually. But she's great, and she's been really lovely to work with, and I just really I want her book to get out in the world in the best way possible.
Well, I feel like if she's waited this long to have her book, she can wait.
Everybody's been she's been along with everybody else, has been incredibly like understanding and patient about all of this. Not that there's anything I can do about it, but
right.
Yeah. So these are 4 books that are all super different from each other. But so I guess like maybe people who aren't familiar with Belt, that might give you a sense of kind of the scope of the publishing program and what we're trying to do. Really, give underrepresented writers a platform in different ways, whether they're 70-year-olds coming to write their first memoir, or burgeoning academics, or like both Phil and Rachel are academics. Rachel's book, I also neglected to mention, is also about really coming to terms with her identity as queer, and coming out, and like how her early days and her early sexual experiences like shaped her queer identity. So it's definitely of interest to anybody interested in that narrative. So poetry, queer memoir, cultural criticism, We got it all.
Well, I always like small presses like that as like an independent bookstore, and as somebody who I'm always drawn to the stuff from the small presses. I feel like it's a lot more adventurous and risk taking, and
We have, yeah, I think that's the benefit of us being a small press. I mean, we have pretty low overhead, relatively speaking, and we're able to take these weird risks. And we think we know, our audience is continually growing, but we know who our audience is. In many ways, we can, anybody who's buying directly from us, we see their names come into our online store, and so we know where they're coming from. And we definitely have, good one-on-one relationships with lots of independent bookstores in the region and beyond. And so we get a lot of feedback from them, like you were saying about Elizabeth's book outselling the Willie Elegy. We get lots of different feedback about who's buying what and what's moving and what's not from different people. And that's great.
yeah, well, good. And you all were kind of doing some reissues of older books with new introductions.
Yes. I don't have any of those lying around right in my immediate vicinity, but we did a series, it's over now, but we did a series called Belt Revivals in 2018 and 19, where we reissued sort of out of print, public domain books of interest to the Midwest, broadly defined, with new introductions by contemporary writers. So we did, and it's both fiction and nonfiction. We did like Hamlin Garland's Main Traveled Roads, which is a collection of short stories from really the turn of the 20th century, late 19th, early 20th century. We did a book by Sherwood Anderson called Poor White, which is the book he wrote after Winesburg, Ohio. So everybody knows Winesburg, Ohio, but not that many people know Poor White. But we've also done some nonfiction, like the rise of this, the Ida Tarbell's Rise and Fall, right? Why am I blanking on the title? Rise of the Standard Oil Company. And Lincoln Steffens's The Shame of the Cities, which are both kind of classics of muckraking journalism. We did a reissue of Charles Chestnut's The Marrow of Tradition, which is a book about the Wilmington race riots.
Yeah, that was the one I was thinking of, because Wiley Cash did
that Wiley did the introduction for. Yeah, that came out last year.
And he's a very big supporter of us in the store, and has been really generous with his time with us. And he
was
great.
Very generous with his time with us as well. And that's a novel. I mean, that's a novel, but it's also obvious. Like last year was the 100th anniversary of the. No, I'm thinking of the Chicago. I'm mixing up my riots.
Yeah.
1898. Anyway, yeah. So we stopped. We're not publishing any more of those, but they're out there. If you look on our website under the Belt Revivals tab, anybody can find out about those. There they are, right? History of the Standard Oil Company. What am I thinking of? Okay. And they're also all over the place. We did The Artificial Man and Other Stories, which is a collection of science fiction stories by Claire Winger Harris, who was the first woman to write science fiction under her own name in the mid-1920s. She had a very brief but highly acclaimed career, and then she kind of disappeared out of nowhere, into nowhere. And so Brad Ricka, who's in Cleveland, wrote the introduction to this collection of her science fiction stories, and also did a little of detective work and tracked down her family and tried to figure out what it was that had happened to her, which is kind of, the story that happened, I think, to a lot of women writers back in time, which was that she got married and wasn't allowed to write anymore. But she was pretty groundbreaking in her day.
Yeah, I'm always fascinated with working at a bookstore. You really realize how many books are published every week.
A lot of books are published every week.
So you realize how many books are being published, and each person that's written that book has spent a lot of time on it.
Yes.
And there's so many people that, like, the saddest part of this job, I think, is seeing the books that
Don't
might
go
not ever
anywhere.
get the audience they deserve. And so I'm
Yeah, and it
appreciative
really,
appreciative of when people are trying to get things back into people's hands, because that's always been what I enjoy most about book selling, is getting stuff that someone's maybe not going to be aware of, that I've kind
yeah.
of stumbled upon and really enjoyed and think is really worthy, and trying to
Oh
help
yeah,
find an audience for
it's such a shot in the arm. My favorite part of this, which I can't, is not happening now, I guess. But my favorite part of this job is being able to go out and do like book festivals and things like that. With the chances that we actually get to hand sell directly to people are few and far between, and it's so fun and so gratifying. Um,
Yeah, there's always, I feel like I'm a very introverted person. And so I feel like the bulk of my social interaction is when I'm at work and
mhm,
speaking with customers.
mhm.
And it just so happens that I like talking about books. And so I get to be somewhere where there's people talking about books all the time.
Yeah.
And now that that isn't a part of the equation, it's a lot of a different work environment. So I feel really fortunate that people have been wanting to do these videos so I can chat with them about books for a little
Yeah, I miss it too. I mean, again, I always work remotely, but I really look forward to like the summer book fair season a lot. Really fun. So
bit. And you probably never thought you would say that.
no, never thought I would say that. I mean, are the big book? I'm in Chicago, so the big book fair here is usually at the beginning of June, and we just got an email that's been postponed to Labor Day weekend. So fingers crossed for Labor Day weekend.
And how is it?
Let's see.
What's the situation like in Chicago? Because I've heard some things, but I'm not. Feels
I
like
mean,
every place is different.
we're under a stay-at-home order. It's and so and it seems to be pretty broadly adhered to. Just based on my observations looking out my window and sitting on my front porch. We I'm very, very happy to be living in Chicago right now. I feel like our local government, state and city government, has done a pretty great job of responding to the COVID-19 crisis. For our governor in particular, uh, we've had a string of really terrible governors,
Right.
and I say a prayer of thanks every day that like Bruce Rauner and Rod Blagojevich are no longer the governors of the state of Illinois, and J.B. Pritzker, who I don't think anybody had a lot of. He was kind of a cipher. He just seemed like a well-meaning, a good billionaire. He was like a relatively decent billionaire who'd done some good things. He's really doing an amazing job. Cuomo's getting all the credit. Pritzker is like walking the walk.
Okay.
He's doing an incredible job. So very happy about that. Very grateful for that. I don't know. There's rumors on the ground that things are going to get tighter here. They just announced yesterday a liquor curfew, so you
Okay.
can't sell liquor after 9 o'clock at night anymore. The mayor of Chicago shut down the lakefront 2 weeks ago after we had our first nice day, and of course everybody went out and was congregating by the lake, and so that they immediately put the hammer down on that. So the whole 18 miles of lakefront along Lake Michigan are now off limits, which is a giant bummer. But the parks inland, which I'm lucky enough to live within walking distance of a pretty big city park, are still open. And as long as nothing gets too out of hand, as the weather gets nicer, I'm just crossing my fingers that they stay open. So other than that, we're struggling. Just taking it one day at a time, I guess.
I think everyone is,
Yeah, I mean, that
obviously.
sounds like such a platitude, but I'm trying really hard to stay calm and not freak out. And I've been really I'm lucky that I'm one of the people who gets to be really busy.
Hmm.
And that I'm so incredibly grateful for that, because it's given me a real sense of purpose, among other things. And And, I'm just not, I'm able to be disciplined enough to not spiral off into despair more than like once a day.
I think
So,
that's a good average. I think that's where I'm at is maybe it's more for me like just a low level of dread constantly.
yeah,
It could be much higher, but I feel very lucky to be getting an income right now.
I feel very, very lucky to be getting an income for the foreseeable future. I have my other, so this belt is a part-time job for me, and my other part-time job is as I have two. I teach at one of the local colleges here. So that's, we just had our first online Zoom class today, and no, this week, Monday. That was fun, weird. I'd only just started teaching in January, so I think I'd only just barely figured out how to teach, and then I had to figure it out all over again.
Right.
And then I also work as a managing editor for a local newspaper on the south side of Chicago, and that's been incredibly busy and hectic, and just the processing like a massive amount of information that's coming in from all of the different community groups and organizations working in our reader coverage area. And that's I mean, it's that in itself has been almost a full-time job. So I'm not complaining. It's great. I'm
Yeah.
happy to be useful and busy.
Yeah. I feel like all of my complaints are extremely minor.
Yeah.
So I try not to do it too much, but
Yeah. I'm happy that I'm healthy. So far, everybody I know is healthy.
fridge is stocked, all of that. So
Yeah.
I guess we can finish up so we talked about what you're getting wrong about Appalachia, but I'm wondering if maybe there is one other essential backlist belt
Oh
book,
gosh.
or if that's too much to pick one. I don't want you to have to choose.
Hold on one second.
Okay.
These are just the ones that I happen to have on my bookshelf right now. I have a lot more downstairs in a different area. But these are a couple books that have come out relatively recently. So this City is Killing Me is a title that came out last August by a Chicago social worker named Jonathan Foyles. And it's the subtitle, if you can't see it, is Community Trauma and Toxic Stress in Urban America. So it's, again, incredibly relevant. He uses case histories from his practice at a West Side community mental health clinic, working with really disadvantaged, vulnerable populations, to talk about how kind of public policy decisions impact mental health in cities, all of which is obviously super relevant right now, as we're talking about a whole nation/world, coming out of this with some degree of PTS and trauma. So this is a really beautiful book that I think has a lot of legs as for anybody working in mental health or community development. Really, really, again, slim volume, short read, but a pretty profound call to arms to look at structural changes that in cities and in government that can help better the lives of individual residents. So big fan of this book. This is a book that I just think people should read because it might take them out of themselves for a little bit, which came out a couple years ago. It's called In the Watershed. It's by Ryan Schnurr, who is currently the editor of Belt Magazine, which is our sister publication. We have Belt Publishing and we have Belt Magazine. And Belt Magazine is now completely separate as an entity from Belt Publishing, but obviously we share a lot of affinities. So Belt Magazine is an online outlet covering, issues of interest to the Rust Belt and the greater Midwest region. And Ryan is the editor of it. And this is a book that he wrote a couple years ago for us about a canoe trip down the Maumee River in Ohio and Indiana. And so it's a piece of sort of like ecological journalism / memoir, talks a lot about climate change and about sort of the history of the river in the development of that region. And it's a really lovely piece of nature writing. And if you just want to read some good nature writing, well, you can't actually maybe go out in nature so much right now, I would recommend In the Watershed. And then I'm just be craven and plug my own book, which is the Chicago Neighborhood Guidebook, which is a book that came out last September that I've been working on for the last year and a half. And these neighborhood guidebooks are kind of sisters to our city anthology series, which was like the Detroit book that I held up earlier, and all these other books that are collections of writing about different cities. The neighborhood guidebooks are, again, they're not really guidebooks. It's a total misnomer, bait and switch. But it's really a collection of essays and personal writing about different Chicago neighborhoods. And this is the third in a series that we've done. We've also done Cleveland and Detroit. And we have a Pittsburgh neighborhood guidebook coming out later this year, or early 2021 as well. So I really love this book. It came out in September. I did a lot of events around town in different neighborhoods with different writers for it. It was really fun. It was getting to go to different neighborhoods and sort of, bring writers from different communities into new communities that they hadn't necessarily didn't have a lot of experience with before that, and really kind of build as a cultural. It's both a book, and for me, this was really like an outreach program and a platform to build on other things with. I was talking with some groups about doing some events this summer around the book, like walking tours and things like that. Those are all on the table, off the table right now. But if you want to read about Chicago neighborhoods, you can buy the Chicago Neighborhood Guidebook.
Great. Those are all great choices. Well, thank you a lot for doing
Thanks,
this.
Justin. This is really fun.
Yeah,
Talk to people.
I know. I posted an interview today that was an hour long, and then I did one yesterday that was pretty close to that too. And I'm realizing people are just, I don't know if this is true, but I feel like people are willing to just sit and chat right now, which is nice. I don't think under normal circumstances I could start a project like this. So
yeah, I mean, I'm definitely looking forward to the day when my life isn't like full of Zoom meetings, but I have faith that day will come again.
Well, I'm lucky I don't work in like this. If I wasn't using Zoom for this, it wouldn't be a part of my life.
It's become a very like key part of my life.
Yeah.
The other day, like on Tuesday, I think I had 5 Zoom meetings, and by the end of the day, I was just like, oh, I'm so tired of looking at myself. I wish you could like turn that part off. But,
well, one day this is just going to feel like a strange memory.
It will. It's all going to be a dream. I hope. I mean, I don't know where we're going to be when that happens, but where we as a culture and as a community are going to be economically, emotionally, but it will all be a weird dream.
Yes. Well, at the very least, like,
we'll all have read a lot of really good books.
Yes, and hopefully we can all at least go stand by the lake.
Yes, and we can go to the lake. Yeah.
So, what else do you need?
Yeah.
All
exactly.
Right. Well, Martha, thank you so much.
Thank you, Justin. It's really a pleasure.
You too. It was nice to meet you. You too. And enjoy some time off of Zoom.
Yeah, hopefully. Exactly. I think the next one's at 3.
Okay. Oh no, that's so soon.
Well, no, I'm an hour behind you. 3 my time.
Okay. You've got some time. All right. Yeah. Well, thank you so much.
Bye. Thank you.